This presentation will show you, the coordinator, how to add hours for a volunteer and how volunteers can add their own hours. You as a coordinator can add hours for volunteers provided that you have the surveys already attached to the opportunity, which will allow you to add hours to the volunteers. In order to determine if you have the surveys attached to the opportunity, you would first want to click on the Opportunities tab, select the opportunity, click on Edit, then click on Surveys. In Surveys, I already have the Additions Add Bulk Time Report and also the Additions Add Volunteer Time Report moved over to the surveys used by this opportunity column. If you have these surveys on the left, you'll want to move them over using the double arrow. The next step is to select the Pie/Volunteers tab. Select your volunteer or search for your volunteer. Check off your volunteer. Then click on Logbook, Only Selected Volunteers. You can also select all volunteers in grid if you're attempting to add hours to multiple volunteers. You will now be in the eCoordinator logbook. Click on New, then click on the Additions Add Volunteer Time Report survey, then click on OK. From the survey, you will notice the title of the opportunity listed at the top. You will then notice the name of the volunteer. In this case, mine is Test Tariano. So here on the survey, you can now add the hours for the volunteer. Let's say this volunteer worked 10 hours on the 22nd. I can select the 22nd for the start date and then the end date. Type in how many miles they drove, and if there is a description of the service performed, you can also enter that, then click on OK. You will now see the entry for that volunteer in the eCoordinator logbook. And if you want to see the hours, you can scroll over and you'll see the individual hours. You can also manipulate this grid by clicking on Grid Settings. And if you want to move up the individual hours to the top, you can. If you want to add any additional entries to the grid, you can. And also, I wanted to point this out, that it's very important that you select the period. Let's say you went in, you put in hours for a volunteer or volunteers, and when you come here to this grid, you don't see any entries made. Well, it could be that you're not in the correct period that you selected. For example, if you had selected September last month, you went in and you put retro hours for a volunteer, and you selected a date of last month. Well, you have to make sure where it says period, it would be last month for the period, and then the entry will show. Well, if it's this month, make sure you select this month, or if it's this week or today, whichever period it is, just bear that in mind. Just make sure you select the right one. Okay, now let's move on to the volunteer side. Let's see how a volunteer add their own hours. Okay, so I have my test volunteer here. Now that we are on the volunteer dashboard, you will see there is a link on their dashboard titled Report Service Survey. This link basically allows them to add the hours to a survey. So when they click on Report Service Survey, they see a drop-down and they can select which opportunity and for which survey. After selecting an opportunity and the survey, they can now enter their hours just like how you did as the coordinator. Let's say, for example, they had went on a field trip today. They'll put the start date as today, the end date as today, and the amount of hours they did. Let's say the field trip was for 7 hours, and the miles. They can put the amount of miles and a description of the service performed. They will see a thank you confirmation letting them know that their entry has been completed, and if they want to make another entry, they can. They also have the ability to click on View Hours, which will show them the entry they made. And they have the ability to edit any of the records to change their hours, miles, or description from the logbook details. And also in View Hours, it shows them the logbook summary. Just a note, the entries you see here, not all of them would be from a survey. Now, they may see entries they made when they signed in using the sign-in station. So the logbook details under View Hours shows any entry made via survey or via sign-in station. They can also go to their dashboard by clicking on their hello and their name, and they'll see their total hours served from their dashboard. I hope this was helpful, and this concludes this presentation.